In January 2026, 7 European leaders issued a joint statement condemning the United States of America. Not Russia, not China, not Iran. America, the nation that has defended Europe for more than a century. The charge was American assertiveness, sparked by U.S. interest in Greenland, an Arctic territory whose security America has guaranteed since World War II. Danish leaders warned this could end the transatlantic partnership. France, Germany, and Britain echoed the outrage. But this is not a story about Greenland. It is a story about memory and how easily it disappears. To understand this moment, we must go back to the summer of 1914, when Europe ruled the world and believed it always would. Across the Atlantic sat the United States, dismissed as irrelevant, a former colony, a nation of farmers and shopkeepers. The U.S. Army numbered fewer than 100,000 men, smaller than Romania's. European elites mocked America openly. Kaiser Wilhelm reportedly called Americans incapable of real war. British officers joked that Americans were good at making money, not fighting. Then Europe went to war with itself. What was supposed to be a short conflict became an industrial slaughter. Trenches stretched across the continent. Machine guns erased entire generations. At the Somme, 60,000 British soldiers were killed or wounded in a single day. At Verdun, 300,000 men died for ground that never mattered. By 1917, Europe was collapsing. France mutinied, Russia imploded, Germany prepared one final push west. And in that moment, when European civilization stood on the edge of self-destruction, they called the nation they had mocked. They called America. America did not answer because Europe deserved saving. It answered because Americans believed in something larger than European pride. Within 18 months, the United States mobilized over 4 million men. 2 million crossed the Atlantic to fight in France. At Belleau Wood, American Marines fought through weeks of relentless combat. Nearly 10,000 Americans were killed or wounded. In the Meuse-Argonne offensive, over 1 million U.S. soldiers attacked the German line. 26,000 died in just 47 days. When German prisoners were told these soldiers were Americans, one reportedly replied, "Then the war is lost." On November 11, 1918, the war ended, not because Europe had won, but because American intervention made German defeat inevitable. Over 116,000 Americans lay buried in European soil, young men who crossed an ocean to save nations that once laughed at them. You might think such sacrifice would leave a permanent mark. It did not. Europe squabbled over spoils, imposed crushing reparations, nursed old hatreds. The next catastrophe was planted almost immediately. America, exhausted and disgusted, withdrew. It wanted nothing more to do with Europe's endless conflicts. During the interwar years, Europe disarmed and appeased. When Adolf Hitler rearmed Germany, Europe hesitated. In 1938, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain returned from Munich promising peace for our time. Within a year, Europe was at war again. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Poland collapsed. Britain and France declared war and then did nothing. When Germany struck west in 1940, France collapsed in just 6 weeks. Paris fell. The British Army fled at Dunkirk, abandoning nearly all its equipment. Europe stood defenseless. Once again, Europe needed America. Even before entering the war, the United States saved Europe through Lend-Lease. Over $50 billion in aid, nearly $700 billion today, flowed to Britain and the Soviet Union. American factories became the arsenal of democracy. Tanks, trucks, aircraft, food, produced in unimaginable quantities. Stalin himself admitted privately that without American aid, the Soviet Union could not have survived. Then America entered the war fully. On June 6, 1944, American soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy. At Omaha Beach, men died by the hundreds before noon. Bodies piled against obstacles. Cliffs were climbed under machine gun fire. From Normandy to Berlin, American forces drove into the heart of Nazi Germany. At the Battle of the Bulge, 19,000 Americans died stopping Hitler's final offensive. When the war ended in 1945, 400,000 Americans were dead. Europe was free again. America did not stop at victory. It rebuilt Europe. The Marshall Plan sent $13 billion, $150 billion today, into reconstruction. Cities rose from rubble. Factories reopened. Populations survived. No empire in history had ever done this. When Stalin blockaded West Berlin in 1948, America responded with planes, not tanks. For 15 months, American pilots flew nonstop, delivering 2.3 million tons of supplies. 31 Americans died keeping Berlin alive. NATO was born in 1949. An attack on Europe would mean war with America. At the height of the Cold War, over 430,000 American troops were stationed in Europe. Thousands of nuclear weapons stood guard. American taxpayers funded bases, logistics, and deterrence. Europe slept peacefully, and gradually Europe realized something dangerous. It did not need to pay for its own defense. America would do it. Defense budgets shrank. Welfare states expanded. Promises to spend 2% of GDP in defense were made and broken for decades. American presidents complained. Europe ignored them. In 2014, Russia annexed Crimea. Europe hesitated. In 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, and the illusion shattered. Europe had no ammunition, no production capacity, no readiness. The EU promised 1 million artillery shells and delivered barely half. Once again, America filled the gap. By 2025, the U.S. had sent $175 billion in aid. Abrams tanks, Patriot missiles, intelligence, logistics. America spent over $800 billion on defense. European NATO members spent less than half combined, which brings us back to today. After a century of protection, after millions of lives, after trillions of dollars, Europe condemns America, not for abandoning Europe, but for asserting its own interests. Greenland became the symbol, but not the cause. The cause is this: Europe has grown accustomed to American sacrifice, security without responsibility, protection without payment, power without consequences. And when America reminds Europe that power has costs, Europe reacts with outrage. This is not a story about Greenland. It is a story about forgotten debt. History is unforgiving, and nations that forget who protects them eventually learn what life without protection really looks like.